Okay, guys. This is Salted Word. We're in Salted Mark. This is part 12. Now, small disclosure, I did actually do this on the deck a while ago. I don't like ending in the middle of the chapter, but I didn't upload it because this particular verse that's actually coming up next, it's a big one, it's important, and I feel responsible to expand on it, not just to throw it out there and leave you guys to your own with it, because there's a lot of depth to it and a lot behind it that you kind of have to. You can't just. It's one of those verses that I can't just read it to you and leave you to yourself on it. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be a false teacher. I don't want to be a false teacher, so I'm gonna really. I put some stuff together on this one, just real quick, light, just New Testament stuff, nothing really crazy. And I also did feel some conviction as I was making the video. There was something I left out that I should have said. So this is Salted Mark. This is part 12. We're in second Cor- we're in excuse me, getting ahead of myself. We're in Mark chapter 7, starting from verse 14. And it says, "And after he called the multitude to him again, he began to say to them, 'Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside the man which is going into him can defile him, but the things which proceed out of the man are what defile the man. If any man has ears to hear, let him hear.' And when leaving the multitude, he had entered the house, and his disciples questioned him about the parable. And he said to them, 'Are you so lacking in understanding also? Do you not understand that whatever goes into the man from outside cannot defile him, because it does not go into his heart, but into his stomach, and is eliminated?'" They didn't know about cholesterol back then. "Thus he declared all foods clean. And he was saying, that which proceeds out of the man, that is what defiles the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed the evil thoughts, fornications, thefts, murders, adulteries, deeds, coveting, and wickedness, as well as deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these evil things proceed from within and defile the man." Now, there's two sides to this thing here. Now, in one case, yes, Jesus is essentially saying there's not you're not going to put something in your body and that in itself is going to make it unclean. But we have to keep in mind that God is looking at our heart. What are we putting into our body? What is coming out when we do this? Now, this is in part to say, like, yes, he was talking about food, but you also have to take into consideration, yes, there's a lot of churches out there and religious people that say you can't drink wine. I am not one of those. I firmly believe that you can drink wine. Now, the Bible talks about drunkenness, and I'm going to get into that, but the Bible talks about drunkenness as being a fruit of the flesh, but self control is a fruit of the spirit. You need to understand if you are going to drink, you need to not be drunk, if that makes sense. If you have drank before in any kind of moderation, you would know that there's that little line, I'm feeling nice, it's okay, and then there's completely all over the place, can't control yourself, you're being a complete idiot. Now, most of the time when you're like that, remember, look at what's coming out of you. Now you're cursing, now you're trying to fight people, now you're looking at women and having these dirty thoughts, things that is not of God. And the devil's right there, ready to whisper in your ear, and your mind is weak. Now, if you're a little tipsy or whatever, I don't I wouldn't go so far as to call your mind weak in that state. You're a little more susceptible, you're a little more happy, but you should still, if you can't control yourself, then you shouldn't be doing it. That's essentially what I'm getting at with that one. Now, I would like to also touch on the fact that the Bible also later talks about sorcery, which in my Amplified Bible, it defines sorcery as essentially like potions or mixtures that people do. Like, I would consider like heroin, crack cocaine sorcery, especially now that I'm walking past these people on 42nd Street all day. You see somebody standing in the street sleeping on their feet. That's sorcery. That's people, they're taking what God gave us and they're altering it, and they're cooking it, they're doing this with it, they're doing that with it, and they're turning it into something else. Like, I know cocaine comes from the cocoa leaf, the whatever leaf it comes from. It comes from a leaf, which God gave us a leaf. I mean, if you freaking chew on the leaf, I probably don't think that there's a problem with that. But now you're taking it, you're cutting it, you're turning a leaf into powder, and you're adding all these other things to it. Now we're turning into sorcery. Now, on that line, this is going to be a controversial statement. I'm going to go ahead and say that marijuana, it comes off a plant, it comes from the ground, it has medicinal uses. I think God's fine. No, no, I'm not. I can't even say I think. I know God's fine with that. Okay, I've prayed on it plenty. I know it's a plant. Okay, there are plenty of people out there that will say a cigarette is fine, but a joint is terrible. No, come on. A cigarette, that falls under addiction, which we're not supposed to be addicted to things. Poison, we're not supposed to poison ourselves, which I was actually getting to. Now don't come to me with wine is poison, because we if wine is good for your heart. It actually even says in the Bible, before we had science to figure all this stuff out, it says in the Bible, God gave us wine to make the hearts of man glad. That was somewhere in the Old Testament. I'm not going to look for it because that's not important right now. What is important right now is I want to read to you, first and foremost, I want to read to you 1 Corinthians 10:23, because again, I really have to expand on this. So we're going into 23. And this is where Paul says to the Corinthians, it says, all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. Let no one seek his own good, but that of his neighbor. So essentially Paul's saying, because he gets into justification through faith, and that's a whole other thing. Right now I'm just trying to touch on what you're eating and what you're putting into your body. Now, Paul has the faith. He's essentially saying that he can have whatever he likes, but he also has the stature to know he doesn't need anything he likes. You know what I mean? Like, he probably, I'd imagine Paul wasn't a big drinker of wine, because I remember in the letter to Timothy, he talks about telling Timothy to drink wine not for enjoyment, but for his stomach, because again, wine has healing properties. Um, but again, if it's not going to benefit him, like Paul was a super holy man. Like we should all aspire to be like Christ, but Paul took it to a whole other level. So if it wasn't going to help him, now I'm guessing maybe if he was like, again, this is, you got to remember, if I personally, I don't drink like that, but if you're working on a site and you're trying to preach the gospel to these guys and they invite you out to the bar, you can have a few sips, you can have a glass of wine or two with the fellas. You have to be relatable to these people, but again, you have to show them that you have control over yourself. You have to show them that you know where the line is, the limit, you can stop. Or maybe you just don't go there at all. That's between you and God. My biggest thing to everybody is always, God has a specific plan specifically tailored for your life. You need to talk to him about anything that you're going to do. Now, again, some of these things I would put into a questionable position, like, again, marijuana and alcohol. I personally feel, I know, I'm going to be so bold as to say that I know, because I prayed on both of them and I've read my Bible with keen eyes to look, because I've been told my whole life one thing and all these things. I've read this Bible front to back twice, and I just, that's not the vibe I get. I read it, it talks about drunkenness, yes, but if you read it, if you actually read it and you let it suck into your soul, then, and on top of that, there's other verses where it talks about not habitually, having wine, and all throughout the Bible they talk about having wine. There's self-control as a fruit of the spirit. I'm not trying to ramble. I'm not trying to get stuck on one thing here. I'm going to move on to 2 Corinthians 7:1, because this is also important. It says, therefore, having these promises, beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all defilement of flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. Don't go out here just chugging down Pepsis, Red Bulls, bacon every day. Just because it's not going to defile you doesn't mean that we should have it. We're supposed to perfect holiness. Now, again, you're allowed to have these things. I'm not saying a can of Pepsi or a glass of wine is going to send you to hell, but you have to have control over it. Me personally, I stay away from the soda, period. I guess I'm going to have to break this one up into two parts. So this is going to be, so this was part 12. I guess we're going to roll into 12 and a half, but just stay with me, because again, I cannot water this one down. I cannot give this any less attention than I'm going to give it. It is, I wouldn't have a clear conscience if I just threw this out there and left you guys with it. So if you made it this far, please watch 12 and a half.